So now let's talk about the conditional statements present in our that is if and else statements. So in every programming language, be it Python, R, C, C++, or Java, so there are if and else statements present there which you can use to write certain codes which will execute when a certain condition is satisfied, or which will execute when a certain condition is not satisfied. So that can be handled using this if and else statement. So let's go ahead and see how we can write these particular statements in our environment. So the basic syntax of using if is simple. You just have to write the keyword if, and after that in brackets you have to write the condition which you want to check whether that is satisfied or not. And if that condition returns true, then you are going to execute the statement that you are going to write in this curly braces. And if the condition is not satisfied, then nothing is going to happen. Okay. So this execution statement will be run only when the condition is true. Okay. So let's go ahead and see an example for this. So here I have assigned my logical values into A and B. So A is simply true and B is simply false. So I'm simply going to pass this A as my condition. Okay. So basically I'm just checking if true, right? A is true. So if true, so this particular print option should be executed, right? Because as we talked about, whenever the condition will be true, the statement that you are going to write in this curly braces block, that is going to be executed. So here if I write if A, that means if true, then print condition is true. Okay, so let's run this. So as expected, our result was printed. Why? Because in A we have already assigned true. Okay, and now I am assigning false into B, and if I try to again run this statement by passing the condition B, then let's see. So you can see there is no output given, right? So this was not printed. Why? Because our condition was automatically false, right? We have assigned false to this. So the condition was not satisfied. That is why this condition was not printed. So let's go ahead and see another example. So here I'm passing a character in A. Okay, and I'm going to use this particular function h.character. So we have already talked about this function in our strings section, right? So you can check the data type is character or not by simply passing h.character, and in that you can simply pass the variable, and it will check whether if the variable that you have passed is character, then it is going to return true, else it is going to return false. Okay, so if this is true, then our condition will be satisfied and we'll be getting this print true statement, right? So we can see that actually this is the character. So as expected, we should be printing true. So let's go ahead and run this. So you can see it is printed true. Okay. So this is how your basic if condition work. Only if. Okay, we are not talking about else right now. Fine. So whenever you have a condition and you want to do something, you have to execute something after you when your condition is true, then only you want to execute something, then you can go ahead and use this if keyword and pass that condition, and then your execution statement will be running. Okay. Now with vectors, this is a slight different the case. When you use a if condition with a vector, then the cases are a little different. So let's go ahead and understand this. So here I'm passing a numerical value 0 and 1 into my vector, and I'm simply passing that vector as a condition. Okay, and I'm trying to print something. Okay, so first of all, your vector is going to behave a little differently when it is used in a condition. So what happens basically when you pass a vector in the condition, then whatever elements that you have inside your vector, only the first element is going to be checked as the condition, right? So I guess I discussed this when we were talking about your vectors only, that what if a number is greater than 0, not 0, then it is going to be treated as true, and if a number is 0, then it is going to be treated as false. Okay, so here what will happen that in your vector 0 and 1, only 0 is going to be checked for the condition, and what 0 represents? 0 represents false, right? So this is going to be this is not going to be printed. Okay, so let's go ahead and check that. So I'm passing my vector as a condition, and if I try to run this, oh, sorry, let me run this first. Yeah, so you can see actually the warning message is there, but there is no actual, the print that I wanted to be executed is not being executed. Why? Because my first element was 0, and the 0 was automatically treated as a false object. Okay, so this condition was not satisfied. That's why this print statement didn't print. Okay, and you can see what is the warning exactly. The condition has a length greater than 1, and only the first element will be used, right? So whenever you are going to pass a vector or a list or any container object which have more than one element, then if you are using that as a condition in if, then only the first element will be used. Okay, so always remember this. Now, to show you that this is exactly happening, I am just reversing the order. I'm getting 1 first and then 0 at the second place. Okay. So now my first element is going to be executed, that is 1, and 1 will be considered as true. So if I run this, so now if I go ahead and pass this vector as a condition, so it will check on 1, right? And 1 is true. So this should be printed. So let's go ahead and run this. You can see the print statement actually executed. And why? Because our vector has 1 at first position, that is true. So that's why our condition satisfied, and the print was this print statement was printed. Okay, and still the warning is saying that only the first element will be used. Fine. So this is how you can use your if statement. So now let's talk about how can we use else statement, right? So now we have seen the case where if your condition is true, then something is going to happen, right? That you can write in the if statement. What about if the condition is false? There might be something that you want to do when your condition is false, right? So those things you can do in else. Okay. Okay. Like suppose if I was printing this particular thing, that if vector 1, like if this is true, then print first element is non-zero. So you see that there was no message printed here, right? But I want to check whether my actually first element is 0 or not. Okay. So if this didn't print, then I could have used a else statement to actually print the statement to give back a response when this condition is false. So let's go ahead and check our else condition. Okay. So the syntax remain almost same. So there is a if condition, okay, then the execution statement that when the condition is true is going to be executed. And now you can simply write a else and then same curly brackets, and then you can provide execution statement which will be run when the condition is false. Okay, so let's go ahead and see that. So here what I'm trying to do, I'm again assigning A to true and B to false, and I'm writing that if A, that is if true, then this will be printed, else this will be printed. Okay. So what should happen actually? If A is true, then this should be printed and not this, right? Because my if is true, so only this will be printed. So let's go ahead and run this. So you can see condition is true. Why? Because A was assigned with true value, so this was expected. Now if the same thing we try with B, so here what will happen? We have assigned false to B, right? So I have written the same code. I have only changed the argument that I'm passing. So I'm passing B now, and I'm telling it that if this is true, then print condition is true, else print the condition is false. Okay, now my condition is false. Okay, so this statement is not going to be executed, but now it will come into the else block. Okay, because you have given one more condition to the R, that when this condition is false, then don't execute this, but execute this particular thing that I provided in the else statement. Okay, so it's very simple. It's actual like English words like if else. So you can simply think of it like that only. Okay. So if I run this, so basically this is going to be printed. Why? Because my B is false. So let's go ahead and run this. You can see the condition is false. Okay. So whenever the condition that you are providing is not true, then your execution block is shifted to the else statement. Okay. Now the same thing we can check with our vectors also. So here I'm passing 0 and 1. So the first element is 0. So now if I'm going to pass this particular vector as a condition, then only first element is going to be treated, that is 0, and it is be treated as a false object, right? So I'm checking that if vector 1, that is if true, then print that first element is non-zero, and that should be the case. If the element, if this was not 0 and 1, then this will be executed. But here my in my vector this is 0, so this statement is going to be giving false. So my control will directly move to the else part, and this particular statement will be printed. So let's go ahead and run this. So you can see the warning is still the same, that the only first element will be used, but the statement is actually printed that first element is 0, right? That is our else block. Okay, so this is how you can use if and else both together. So let's now discuss about nested if and else statements. So what nested if and else statements means is that in general scenarios that we were talking about, like in this basic things, so you were actually just checking one condition, and on the basis of that particular condition, you were actually executing some part of code, right? But in the real scenarios, when you're going to write some hefty amount of codes, then this is not the ideal case. You will be not facing only one condition on the basis of which you are going to decide whether what exactly are you going to do. So in those cases, you have to actually nest your if and else statements. That means inside a if you have to write another if statement, and inside that if you can again write some another if statement. So this becomes kind of a loop of your if and else statement. So we call that nested if and else statements. Okay. So basically in this particular thing, you are going to check on multiple conditions, and on the basis of multiple conditions, you are going to write multiple set of codes that will be executed whenever one of those conditions is going to be true. Okay. So let's understand this with an example. So first, let's see the syntax. So syntax is a little different. That first of all, you are going to write the if condition, if, then bracket and condition, then the execution statement when this particular condition is going to be true. Okay, so that is the condition one. Okay, so if this is true, then simply this will be executed and rest will be ignored. Okay, but if this fails, then you are going to write a else and then if. Okay, so in Python we write elif, but in this case we are going to write else, then space and if, and then we are going to pass the second condition. Okay, so now this second condition will be checked, and then if the condition satisfies, then we are going to run this particular statement, and if the condition is not satisfied, then we are simply going to move ahead. Okay, or if the condition is satisfied, then this will be executed and rest will not be, the R will not bother to go ahead with any of those conditions further. Okay, so whenever the single condition is satisfied, that execution will be done and the loop will be broken. Okay, so in this case, if the condition 2 satisfied, then this will be printed and rest of all will be ignored. If false, then again go ahead and check one more condition, else if, and the condition number 3. So if this condition is true, then this will happen. And last condition that you can provide, if this is the last condition that I want to check only these 3 conditions, then you can simply end with a else statement. Okay, no need to give else if. Okay, so I'm simply going to pass a else statement here, that okay, if any of these conditions is not satisfied, then simply execute this statement. Okay, so condition 1 is true, then this is printed. Condition 2 is true, then this is printed. Condition 3 is true, then this is printed. And if all the conditions 1, 2, and 3 does not satisfy, then I'm simply going to execute this statement that I've written in my else statement. Okay, so this is the basic syntax. Let's go ahead and understand with a basic example, then we'll see a big example of this particular case. Okay, so what I'm writing here, so A is true and B is false. Okay, so first condition I'm checking if B, that is if B is true or not. Okay, so if this condition satisfied, then I'm going to be printing that okay, B is true. Okay, then I'm writing else if A is true. Okay, so else if A, then print A is true. So if this condition satisfied, then this is printed. If this condition A is satisfied, then this will be printed, right? So we can see that B is false. So actually this is not going to print it. And else if, we have again checking that okay, if A is true or not. So A is true, then we are printing A is true. So if we run this, so you can see that this particular statement is printed. Why? Because our A was true. Okay, so this is how you can use your else if statement. Fine. So let's go ahead and see a better example of understanding this particular case. So what I'm going to do here, I'm writing a code to get a person's name and their salary, and I'm then going to check which tax bracket that person comes in, and I'm going to return the amount of tax that they have to fill up. Okay, so now I'm taking just a general data. It's not a real, like it's not true as per our government, but I'm just giving a general data that this is your tax. Okay, so this is not this is not actually how you are going to do this. Okay, or the tax is calculated in real time. I'm just giving a simple percent on the basis of my calculation. Okay, so let's go ahead and check first. So you can use a command called read line, and this read line you can take a input from the user from your command prompt. Okay, so if you want to take an input from the user, so in Python we use input command. So in R you can simply give that read line. Okay, so whenever you are going to read line, it is going to give a prompt to the user to and then in the prompt this question is going to be asked, and then a space will be provided for the user to type the answer. Okay, so I'm asking from the user the name. Okay, and then I'm asking as a salary. Okay, now whenever you are going to use the read line, so whatever the user is going to give back, it is going to give me a character format. Okay, but I want my salary as an integer. Okay, so that's why I'm typecasting it first. So as integer, I'm converting that particular character into integer, and then I'm passing read line, what is your salary. Okay, so this question is going to be prompted to the user, what is your name, what is your salary, and then that is going to be stored into my salary and name. Okay, so let's go ahead and check our if else if statements. Okay, nested if else, if you will. Okay. So the first condition I'm checking is if the salary is less than 20,000. So I'm simply going to print that no tax to be charged. Fine. So if this condition satisfied, this is going to be printed and rest will not be executed, right? But if this condition fails, then I'm writing a second condition, else if salary is greater than 20,000 and salary is less than 30,000. So in this particular case, I'm going to be printing that tax to be charged is 2.5% and the tax is, I'm going to return the tax amount. So 2.5 into salary divided by 100. Okay. Now, if this condition satisfied, then this is going to be printed and rest will be ignored. But again, if this is false, then it will come, the control will come to my next else if statement. Okay. So now my if statement is if salary is greater than 30,000 and less than 60,000, then the tax to be charged is 5% per annum salary and the tax is 5 into salary by 100. Okay. And if all these three statements are false, that means your user salary is going to be greater than actually 60,000. So then all these conditions will be false. Then I'm simply going to print else if the salary is greater than 60,000. You don't have to write actual condition with this last else statement, because anyways all these conditions will be false. Then and then only your control is going back to your else statement. Or if you want to make more additions, like if you want to make a tax bracket between 60,000 to 1 lakh, then you can again add one more else if statement to calculate that particular tax. Okay. So now I am not actually doing that. I'm simply assuming that above 60,000, I'm going to charge 7.5% per annum. Okay. So now let's go ahead and try and print this. So first I'm going to take the input from the user. So I'm going to run this. So see, the first line is executed and the prompt that we have given is the question. And then it is giving me a space to give back the answer. So let's say Mohit. Now it is going to ask my salary. So I will print each and every salary so that you can go ahead and see how exactly this is functioning. Okay. So I will start with 18,000. Okay. And let's run this. So now if I go ahead and check the salary, so now 18,000 has been stored in my salary. And if I'm going to run this particular code, so let's run this code. So you can see my salary was actually less than 20,000. So you can see the condition printed that no tax to be charged, right? This condition was satisfied. So this was printed. Now let's go ahead and run this again. So let's say name MK. And now I'm going to give this, give a salary that is satisfy this particular condition, that is between 20,000 to 30,000. So let's say 25,000. So if I go ahead and check the salary, so it is now 25,000. So now this condition will be false, but this condition will be true, the second one. So this should be printed. So let's go ahead and run this. So you can see it was between 20,000 and 30,000. So when this condition was false, the control went into this particular condition, checked it, and this was true. So now this is being printed that the salary, the tax to be charged is 2.5%, and the taxable amount is, the tax is 2.5 into salary 100. So you can see the tax is also printed. Okay. Now similarly, you can go ahead and check with multiple commands. So rest of the things you can check. I'm simply going to print this else statement. So I'm going to give a value greater than, let's say 60,000. So let's say 75,000. So let's go ahead and check the salary. So now 75. Let's go ahead and run this. So you can see now the last our else block has executed for the salary 75,000, because all the conditions, this condition less than 20,000, then 20,000 to 30,000 and 30 to 60. So all these conditions are false. So that's why the last statement has been printed. Okay. So this is how your nested if and else works. Okay. So let's move ahead. So now let's talk about one important function that is present in R, that is if else. So this is a function, this is the function name if else function. Okay. So previously we saw that whenever you are using if and else conditions with vectors or list or any container type object, so what was happening, it was only checking the first element at that particular vector, right? So this if else is actually a vectorized form of your if and else conditions. Okay. So there are two ways you can use the if and else statements with your vectors and list, is that using loops. Since we have not studied loops yet, so we will just go ahead and use this if else functions, and let's see how it works. So the syntax for this is very basic. You are just going to write the keyword if else. Okay. Then you are going to provide the condition on the basis of it, which is going to be checked by your R. And according to that condition, if the condition is true, then you are going to write the statement which it should be executed once this condition satisfies, and then in the second line you are going to write the else condition, that is if this condition is false, then what you want to be what you want to execute. Okay, so this is the basic syntax: if else, then the condition, then the statement that should be executed if the condition is true, and then the statement to execute if the condition is false. Okay, so let's see a practical example for this. So here I'm creating a vector, and I'm assigning value -4 to 2 here. So let's create this vector. So you can see -4 to 2, a vector has been created. Okay, now if I go ahead and divide this particular vector, sorry, 5 by this particular vector, so what is going to happen? So we have already discussed this in vector applications, the arithmetic operations in vector. So this is going to give you a element wise result. Okay, so if I run this, you can see you are getting a element wise result, right? So what is happening is, so 5 is first divided by -4, that result is provided, then by -3, then by -2, then by -1, then 0. So 0 is infinity because you cannot divide by 0, then 1, and then by 2. Okay, so now you can see that with 0 you are getting a result infinity, right? So let's go ahead and write a like a condition where we will be checking that whenever the number is 0, okay, so I want to print a result na. Okay, that is not applicable. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here, I'm dividing 5 by, then I'm simply writing using this particular syntax to return back my whatever value that I'm checking. Okay, so what will happen there, I'm writing if else, then I'm passing the vector 1, and I'm passing the condition that vector 1 is not equal to 0. Okay, so if you use this in a simple if and else loop, then what is going to happen, that only your first element is going to be checked and rest will be ignored, right? So let's go ahead and write that code so that you remember. So here I have again written a simple if statement, and what I'm checking here, that if vector 1 is not equal to 0, the same condition that I'm providing here, print 5 by vector 1. Okay, so what is exactly happening here, you can see the result is exactly same that we were getting without any if condition. Okay, so what happened, if you are providing a vector 1 in your if condition, then it is simply going to check only the first element. So the first element it checked, and that was -4, so it gave that, okay, this is not equal to 0, so it went ahead and printed the exact solution that you were getting before. Okay, but that is not our need, right? What we want is, whenever you are going to face a value is equal to 0, then you do not want it to print infinity, you want it to print na. Okay, so what I'm going to do, so that's why we are using this if else together, or this particular function we are using except for this function. Okay, so now if I have written that particular clause here, that if else vector 1 is not equal to 0, so I'm checking this condition. So let me just print it separately so that you can understand it. So I'm going to run it separately for you. So this is my condition, that whenever the vector 1 is not equal to 0, then it print vector 1, and when this is 0, print na. Okay, so when I run this, so you can see all the numbers that we have given in the vector -4 to 2. So all the numbers are getting printed except for our value na. Value 0. So instead of 0, what is printing? Na. Okay, so this is how you can actually do the element wise operation with conditions. Okay, so if you are going to use this particular if or else condition simply, then it is not going to work. So we are using the if else condition together, so to do the element wise operation in a container object. Okay, here vector. Okay, so this is how it works. So now if I go ahead and divide this 5 by this particular condition, so now what is going to happen, let's see. So you can see rest of the results are exactly same, but where you were getting infinity, now you are getting na. Okay, so this is how you can use if and else with vectors. Okay, now let's go ahead and check do one more thing, like let's print the square root of our vector. Okay, so if I run this particular object, so see, you are getting a warning that nans are produced. And why nans are produced? Nans means so basically it is representing missing values, right? So why it is representing like that? Because if you see in your vector, so let me print this vector again for you. So if you see in this particular vector, you can see there are negative numbers, right? And if you try to get a square root of a negative number, it basically gives an imaginary number, right? Or complex number, right? So we are not dealing with that right now. So we can see that these operations actually failed, and that's why returning nan. Okay, but rest of the values it is giving back, right? So now let's go ahead and write this condition that whenever the number is less than 0, so we are not going to get a square root of that number, we are simply going to print na. Okay, that is not applicable. So again, I have written this condition that if else, if vector 1 is greater than equal to 0, then if this condition is true, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to print the vector. Okay, or when this condition is false, then just print na. So what this will do, it will again loop in the vector 1. Okay, it will check each value. So whenever the value is greater than 0, it is going to return that value. But whenever that value is less than 0, it is going to return na at that place. Okay, and then I'm trying to take the square root. So now if I run this, so you can see, except for our nan, I'm simply getting na. Okay, so this is how you can use if else with your vectors. Okay, so here is one more example that I'm checking that in my vector, if a number is divisible by 2, then categorize that as even, and if not, then categorize that with odd. Okay, so simply it is a one line equation. You can say this if else function, this is a one line equation that you can write with your condition as well as executable statements. Okay, so now if I'm going to run this on my vector, so let's see. So you can see actually this is true. So -4 is even, so printed. -3 is odd, then even, odd, even, odd, even, odd. So this is how it is printed. Okay, so these are some multiple examples that I've tried to provide so that you are comfortable with this particular syntax. So again, I'm created a vector and I'm passing let's say integer, and then numeric objects. So let's go ahead and run this. And now what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to check that whether the vector is greater than 5. So it is going to loop inside my vector and check whether the value is greater than 5. So for 1, that is not greater than 5, so it is returning false, because I have provided that when this condition is true, so write true, or when this condition is false, write false. Okay, so whenever 1 is not greater than 5, so this is false, so it is printing false here. So you can see that from 5 onwards it is printing true. Okay, so this is the basic use of your if else function. So this is a new function. This is available in R that you can use with vectors and lists. Okay, so this was our conditional programming. So let's go ahead and see loops.